everybody, hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends. We've got Shaggy Betts, aka Nate Hornung, aboard. He does such great work over at Your Betting News. We're going to chat with him about what we saw with the NBA draft decisions, the guys that returned from the NBA draft that went into the transfer portal, what it means for St. John's that they picked up Tonde Yusufu for Kentucky, picking up Milan Memiselovic, and we're going to be chatting about that and so much more, and a few teams that maybe are flying a little bit under the radar as well. In the final segment, we're going to have a two-segment podcast because we really didn't get any, shall we say, earth-shattering news and notes in college basketball on Wednesday. We did see a few transfer pieces, and we did have a few teams be able to strengthen their rosters a little bit. I'll sum those up in the final segment. A little bit of a shorter podcast today. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, by the way, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. Then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And as per usual, I do beg of you, I do plead with you, please do send in those Twitter/X questions. It'll help this offseason go by a little bit quicker. And additionally, with regards to what we're seeing in college basketball right now, it is starting to get a little bit more thin with regards to college basketball news and notes. A lot of these rosters are starting to get fortified, so we'll probably be starting up these conference previews within the next week, 10 or so days, so be on the lookout there. I'm going to do a specialized conference preview for all 32 conferences, so that's going to be a big bundle of fun. And what else is a big bundle of fun? Getting on great guests. You're going to get that every single day, as we went over 2,300 straight days without a missed podcast. That is going to be continuing, and today, Nate Hornung, he's doing such an excellent job over at Your Betting News, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He's looking at it all 12 months out of the year, but I know that he's gearing up for the World Cup, which is going to be out here in the States in the next few weeks. That's going to be fun. He does a great job on all forms of football, and apparently football as well. So he's got all that covered and so much more. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Shaggy_Betts. And Nate, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Greg. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you aboard. And Nate, we are coming off of some of the biggest pieces of offseason news that we're going to find in college basketball with all the NBA draft decisions, and want to get your thoughts on what we all saw over the last few days, because it feels like it's been the trend over the last 3 or 4 years where a lot of these guys that were marginal, like late first, early second round picks, rather than rolling the dice on the NBA draft, they decided to come back to school.
Oh, yeah. And, we saw plenty of that with some of those big name guys, like we'll talk about, like with Milan, with Ruben Chinyelu, Jeremy Fears, Andrei Stojakovic, all these guys opting to return back to school. And it makes sense just in the era of NIL that, they're going to make a pretty penny playing college basketball next year. So you might as well return if you're not going to be one of those top lottery picks. So it makes a lot of sense. And, I think it's great for the sport overall because I love watching these guys stick around and progress over the years playing college hoops.
Yep, absolutely. And in terms of winners/losers, I just feel like the SEC as a whole was a winner because you get Tyler Tanner back over at Vanderbilt. Amari Allen coming over to Alabama was big. Obviously, Malik Thomas leaving Arkansas, that was a little bit rough, but still, Arkansas, I think, is going to be a rock-solid team with Billy Richmond coming through. And then, obviously, what we saw on Monday, this wasn't quite their NBA draft decision, but Milan Memiselovic deciding that he's going to return to school, be in the portal, and Kentucky signs him for a big, giant truck ton of money. That was huge, too.
Yeah, and like I said, this era now, they're making plenty of money to play college basketball. So, look, he was going to be the most sought-after transfer after withdrawing from the NBA draft. And as a Big 12 guy, as a Kansas guy, I'm glad he's out of our conference. But it makes me a little sick thinking about him in that Kentucky blue. And I just don't know how he's going to fit with this Kentucky roster, especially looking at it as a whole. It just feels like it's kind of a bunch of random guys pieced together, and we'll see what happens when they get on the court together. But not a team that I'm very high on going into this season, especially like you said, looking at the rest of the SEC, absolutely stacked from top to bottom. So could be another tough year for Kentucky fans in my eyes.
Yep, for Kentucky, it's certainly much better now than it was before because it felt like they did a really good job of collecting all those role players that they had nothing to bring it together. At the very least, now they bring it together. And where
Mhm.
do you see Kentucky right now in the SEC? Because certainly I can't put them above Florida. I can't put them above Tennessee. After that, it becomes more of a roll of the dice because I like what Alabama has. They obviously are a team that I don't trust to be able to win 5+ games in the NCAA tournament, but I think that they're going to be rock solid out there in the SEC. Mentioned Vanderbilt. Had they not gone back Tanner Thomas, I really feel like they would have been dealing with a lot of issues, but I am bringing back Tyler Tanner. I think that that's going to be big for them. How do you see this Kentucky team? Because I'm thinking before Milan Memisevic signed with them, I thought they were going to be in the bottom half of the SEC. Now, at the very least, I think that they're more towards the middle/upper half.
I'm right there with you. Definitely middle towards upper half. Probably maybe fighting for a top 5 spot towards the end if they can get hot. But you said it with the Florida Gators. I mean, they are returning plenty of production, getting actually former Wildcat Denzel Aberdeen back this season as well to help with their backcourt. I really like the Florida Gators. They're easily one of my way too early national champion contenders, and not just to win the SEC, but to win the whole thing. And yeah, like you said, Arkansas still scary with Coach Cal. Alabama returning Amari Allen was huge, and we know what happens with Tennessee and Rick Barnes. So I'd have Kentucky probably fighting for a top 5 spot at best upcoming this season in the SEC.
Yep, absolutely. As we do have our good friend Nate Hornung, better known as Shaggy Bets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. So then there's one team out there in the SEC that we've got no idea on, and that would be LSU because we just don't know what the roster is going to be. They tried to sign RJ Lewis, and I don't know if he's going to be eligible or not for the upcoming season. They've got a lot of international men of mystery, including a man in Yam Madar that was drafted in 2020 and is trying now to play college basketball. How do you take a look at LSU? Because, I mean, certainly if they can get all their pieces in there, they've got a lot of talent. But even if they do, I wonder how it's all going to mesh. And with a lot of these international guys, the international rules are so much different than college basketball rules, too.
Yeah, it's going to take some adjusting if they gain eligibility. And, personally, I kind of think we need to draw a firm line somewhere. And that would include not granting most of these guys college eligibility. So who knows what the LSU roster is actually going to look like in November. The one kind of glimmer of hope, I guess, is signing Abdi Bashir, which I think hasn't happened since we last spoke. But, a 44% sniper from beyond the arc for Kansas State. I think that's at least a solid piece on this team, along with signing Austin Nunez as well from UTSA to kind of run the whole show offensively. But, I mean, yes, Will Wade got very creative with his signings these offseason, but we'll see if it all works out. I think it's going to take plenty of court orders to get there before November.
Yep, certainly. That is going to be so fascinating to say the least. And it is interesting to look at some of these teams that are going much more international. Like we saw with Illinois, they were able to do so to a lot of success. Virginia Tech tried that last season. It really didn't go well there. And how do you try to be able to gauge these teams? They're bringing in a lot of, for lack of a better term, international men of mystery, because I feel like it's so much more difficult than even with high school freshmen, because at the very least with high school freshmen, you've got like the 247 sports rankings and everything like that. And with these international leagues, the difference between one league to another is just a difference of night and day, it feels like.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And, thankfully they're all adjusting to the college game. So that's at least one constant for us. But it's forced me to pay more attention to the international scope of basketball. Following kind of the high school circuit, just being here in America is, fairly easy and made things, kind of a breeze. But yeah, I've had to look into the international rosters and, okay, who is this guy? I've never heard of him before. Let's look up his stuff. It's definitely made an adjustment. But, obviously, like you said, Brad Underwood specifically has done a great job of getting those international guys and making them mesh together on the court. Illinois, another team like Florida, I'm very high on for this upcoming season, just with their returning pieces and the new signings as well, especially with Stefan Vox pairing up with Andrei Stojakovic and David Mirkovic. I think that Illinois team could very well get right back to the Final Four.
Yep, and I think that the Big Ten in general has gone a little bit under the radar because I love the moves that we've seen out there in the Big East this offseason. I feel like they're one of the most improved conferences in all of college basketball. No doubt about the SEC. They're spending money as well. But how do you take a look at this Big Ten landscape? Because I would argue a team like a Wisconsin, I would have liked to have seen them do a little bit more. Washington, I don't know what to make out of them because it feels like they threw a lot of money out of two guys in the last few off seasons. They brought in Great Osibor a few off seasons ago, and they brought in nothing around Great Osibor. And then Hans Steinbeck felt like he was a guy out there on an island as well. But I look at UCLA, and they've been able to make some nice moves as well. It's really interesting in the Big Ten because I feel like typically there's a big giant middle, but I do feel like there's a much bigger divide now than before with regards to have and the have-nots in that conference.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. And I see it the exact same way. I still think it's Michigan's to lose, especially with their new transfers coming in. But I have been impressed with Indiana and what they've done this offseason. A couple of big signings that I think could, get that program back towards the top of the Big Ten, which, I think is where they belong. Just, go-to scorer with Marcus Burton, a great pairing there with Aiden Sherrill to help that front court as well. So I'm excited to see what Indiana can do. I think college basketball is better when Indiana's good. So I'm rooting for the Hoosiers this upcoming season. But ultimately, I'm with you. I think the top of the Big Ten is going to be very, very good, whereas the middle and the bottom might be a bigger fall off.
Yeah, Northwestern, I'm not loving what I'm seeing out of them right now as well. And with Penn State, it's just been a train wreck for them over the last few seasons. So we'll see if some of those programs are able to get back online, as we've got Nate Hornung, better known as Shaggy Best, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly I think that the Big East is going to be interesting. And I want to get your thoughts on St. John's because they're one of the teams that were big beneficiaries of what we saw over the last week or so with Tonde Yusufu. Really, he just decided that he was not going to go into the NBA draft or stay around in there. He immediately signs with St. John's. And that was a team that, much like Kentucky, I thought was a piece away. I thought maybe they could be sliding down the top two or so in the Big East, but I think that they're right back there with the signing, and I thought that this was one of the most impactful ads of the entire offseason.
You are absolutely correct. A stud freshman at Baylor last year. We saw how athletic he was, and I really think he fixed Pitino's system at St. John's. He's got length. I think he's a very, very good on-ball defender, which doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot. You focus on his offensive game, but I think he's going to play some hard-nosed defense like Pitino likes. And, St. John's as a whole, like you said, kind of just one piece away. I think that's a huge signing for them, but I still think they probably need a little bit more help on both sides of the ball to really get over the hump there. But looking forward to see what the Johnnies can do this upcoming season.
Oh, I am right there with you, and it has been a wild off season. And Nate, it's been a few weeks since we've had you aboard, so I just want to get your thoughts on a team or two that maybe we haven't talked about yet that you feel like is flying a little bit under the radar right now, but you just have really liked the off season that they've had, whether that be a team that was dealing with NBA draft decisions, or maybe they just made a few signings here in the last few weeks, last month or so, that has gotten lost with all the NBA draft decisions and additionally what LSU is doing.
Yeah, it's tough because we have to pay attention to LSU, right? They're the last team to fill their roster. But I think I have talked about them before, but I am high on the Texas Longhorns coming into the season. Obviously, it's a very, very stacked SEC like we've alluded to, but I really like the signing of David Punch staying in the state. I really like Isaiah Johnson as well. I think he had a breakout year for Colorado, obviously, as a freshman. I think he's due for a big upside this year for Texas. So I like what Sean Miller's got going down there in Austin. I think they've got a great transfer class coming in. So I'm very high on Texas coming into this season. Maybe not to win the SEC, but, it's tough. They went all the way from the first four to the Sweet 16 this year, so that's going to be tough to beat. I think they could do it with what they got brought in this upcoming season.
I'm right there with you. I think that it's going to be a much better team defensively. It's now year number 2 for Sean Miller. I felt like the plan was to really get things rolling year 2 and beyond. And hey, they had themselves a nice year last year, as you alluded to, so I'm right there with you on the Longhorns. And my friend, I know you're doing such amazing work over at Your Betting News. You're getting set for what is going to be a tremendous World Cup. You're doing a great job on the football, baseball front, and so much more. So let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Absolutely. You can find me on all social media at Shaggy_bets. You can find my written work at bettingnews.com. And then you can find me on the Betting News Network hosting plenty of shows Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Central. 11 to noon Central is when I host the morning spread on the Betting News Network.
Absolutely. Our good friend Nate is doing such a tremendous job on so many different fronts. He's dialed in with everything over on Your Betting News, and every single time he joins me, on such great insight. So a big thanks to Nate for joining me on Coast to Coast Soups, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming next, it is that time of the podcast to give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always a pleasure to be able to get our good friend Nate Hornung, aka Shaggy Betts, aboard. I know that he's doing such an amazing job looking at this great sport of college basketball all 12 months out of the year. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. Did so once again today. So a big thanks to Nate for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. Long Island has certainly been hitting it hard with regards to the transfer portal over the last few days. They bring in their latest in Kamari Jones, who was over at Chicago State this last season for Long Island, by the way, about 24 to 48 hours ago. This adds to the fact that they were able to bring in another player in Daquan Davis, who is over at Providence, and I don't know if this is going to be quite a game changer with bringing in Jones. Last year he was averaging about 4.5 points per game, began his career over at Western Carolina, was unable to get out there on the floor. 6'4", a little bit of a gadget guy, that is career about 33% three-point shooter, but should be able to give this team a little bit more depth in the backcourt, and they are going to have a good backcourt. Vashon Alouette, who has a double-figure score 2 seasons ago over at TCU, was really good over Old Dominion, comes in. Jashawn Jean-Charles, 6'6" combo player from Chicago State, he's coming in as well, so really like this Long Island roster. This is another piece that is going to be able to help them out, so this is a big one for them. And then I was just speaking of Chicago State a second ago. You've got Marcel Bryant, who he was over at Prairie View last season. He has decided that he is going to be going to Chicago State. Chicago State has been one of the most brutal teams in all of college basketball for the last few seasons, but I like this pickup for Bryant. He began his career over at Omaha. He, 2 years ago, was really able to have a heyday with Prairie View. 2 years ago, he was a starter for the team, 9.5 points, 5 boards, a steal, a block per contest. This past season was limited to 13 games due to injury, and when he was over at Omaha, was a little bit more of a mix and match guy. Actually did shoot 40% this last season over at 6'7", and typically this is a Chicago State team that just gets lambasted down low. That was their big issue last season. Last season, they were a bottom 15 team in all of college basketball in terms of their two-point shooting, both offense and defense. They have addressed that here in the offseason. Davius Lowry, who is a 6'7", little bit of a combo player over at CSUN, Cal State Northridge. He's going to be coming in. They've also got Malik Price, who's going to help out the backcourt, coming in from Cal State Bakersfield. Meet me for the Roadrunners. I like the pickup as well of Amari Caraway, who comes over from Charleston Southern, and it just feels like in general, the Chicago State team, it has much more depth than it has over the last few seasons. So some good pickups there, and I do think that this one is very much going to be able to elevate them as well. Chris Johnson, he last season was over at Central Florida, and he was a solid player last year over at Central Florida. He was able to average a little bit over 6 points per game. He has decided that he is going to be going to Oregon State, and I really love what Oregon State has been able to do here in the offseason. This is a group that they have really been attacking things with regards to size, and for Oregon State, obviously, they are back in the Pac-12 after the hiatus from a season ago, but for Oregon State, they let go of Wayne Tinkle. It was very much a long time coming. He was able to buy himself a lot of time after that Elite Eight run, but Justin Joyner, I think, is really doing a great job in terms of building things right when it comes to the man that they're getting in Johnson. He had some three-point shooting, shot about 36.5% from three. A former top 100 recruit, began his career over at Texas, couldn't really find his sea legs legs there, was over at Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin for a year where he was able to, for lack of a better term, really rehabilitate his career. And with playing for a year over at Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, he knows all too well about being able to have active hands, being able to generate some turnovers, so that's going to be something that helps out this team as well. But you just look up and down the boulevard. Dennis Evans is a former top 40 recruit, 7-footer that comes over from Louisville and Grand Canyon. Daniel Freitag, a 16-plus point per game scorer over at Buffalo. They bring in Jackson Rasmussen, double-figure scorer over at Idaho this past season. Xavion Staten, he was over at BYU this last season. He's a former top 75 recruit. Legend Smiley. I really like this Oregon State team. This is another great piece for them. Felt like they needed a little bit more three-point shooting. They get it here with Chris Johnson, so that is a great pickup for them. Murray State continues to go to the international route. Tyler Sulach, he was a guard that was playing over for Bylos out there in the country of France. He has decided that he is going to be coming over as well. A little bit of a sharpshooter out there. Didn't necessarily see the world's greatest amount of minutes, but you are noticing a lot of these teams are going international if they're looking to be LFL at their roster. We've seen Campbell do this as well. They're bringing in Filip Bosovic. He was over there for, I believe, some sort of foreign country, maybe like Montenegro. They are really trying to be able to go and find these guys that maybe are falling through the cracks internationally. There's a little bit of NIL money to be spent, so I do think that this is going to be something that we're going to be seeing a lot of here the next few weeks, so I'm certainly going to be keeping my eyes on that, and do have my eyes on this as well with Makan Duoff, who was over at Fresno State this last season. He has decided that he is heading on over to Lindenwood. For Lindenwood, it's a bunch that was much better on the glass last season than they have been in the past, so are lacking with regards to offense. 6'11" big man that he was only averaging about a point, a rebound, and a half per contest, but he should be able to bring this team a little bit of life down low. And for Lindenwood, they've really been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to balance out a little bit more here in the offseason. They bring in Dom Clay, who I really liked over at North Dakota State. They're also bringing in Matar Diop as well. He was over at Stetson, so he's another 6'10" gentleman that should be able to help out down low. I like the pickup of Miles White as well, so I do think that Lindenwood doing a nice job having a little bit more balance than what we've seen in the past as well. And then one other note that we did see in college basketball is that Elijah Brooks, he was over at Houston Christian this last season, limited to 8 games. In the 8 games that he played, he was very rock solid. 12.5 points, steal and a half, 3 assists, 4.5 rebounds per game. Was a very nice stat sheet stuffer for them. For Brooks, began his career over at North Dakota as well, and when he was over at North Dakota, was a little bit more of a reserve there before the last 2 years, was solid over at Houston Christian. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Florida Gulf Coast. Florida Gulf Coast, one of the more disappointing teams this last season, but they are a program that has some deep pockets. They've got a guy in Pat Chambers that has some really good connections out there to the northeast part of the country, and he's been trying to be able to utilize those a little bit more. Justin Hauser is coming over from Penn State as a true 7-footer, but for Florida Gulf Coast, they've been looking a little bit more the Division II route, so we'll see if they're going to be able to bring in a few more guys to be able to fortify this roster, and we're looking to fortify things for this upcoming college basketball season. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Cuz Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNet_81. Keep in mind, large DM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast for over 2,300 straight days without a missed podcast. We're going to get started with those conference previews here, hopefully within the next week or so, as well as these rosters become a little bit more fortified. Probably going to have a few more 2-part podcasts because we are starting to get these rosters a little bit more set, and then once the season starts, as per usual, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.